2604, we'll open the hearing. Adam, can you give us a briefing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2604 would include gross weight or gross vehicle weight to the definition of a class of motor vehicle for driver's license, and it would modify the definition of commercial motor vehicles and creates definitions for air mile and gross vehicle weight in the Kansas Uniform Commercial Driver's License Act. Under Section 1 of the bill, this will provide for various classes of motor vehicles that a driver's license can entitle a person to drive. Commercial motor vehicles are defined as either Class A, B, or C. Commercial motor vehicle classes are currently determined by gross weight rating or gross combination weight rating of the vehicles to determine the class of license necessary to operate the vehicle. Under this bill, gross vehicle weight and gross combination weight, as defined pursuant to this new definition, would be a determining factor for the commercial vehicle classes of the driver's license for driver's license purposes. Section 2 of the bill would amend the definition section of the Act. The bill would modify the definition of commercial motor vehicle to mean motor vehicles that are a combination of motor vehicles used in commerce to transport persons or property. The new definition would provide 3 different vehicle definitions by group designations. This new definition would also include gross vehicle weight in the definition for each group of commercial motor vehicles as applicable, essentially Group A, Group B, and Group C. Pursuant to the bill, there would also create new definitions for air mile and gross vehicle weight that would be defined under the Act, and the bill would become effective upon publication in the statute book, I believe. Yes. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Adam? Seeing none, thank you. First up, proponent, we have Technical Trooper Nicholas Wright. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. First of all, my name is Nick Wright. I work as a trooper with the Kansas Highway Patrol, and I work in our commercial vehicle enforcement troop. I have the unique, what I consider privilege, to train all of our personnel in commercial vehicles, trucks, buses, and also many of our local allied partners as well. This is an important bill to our state and to us as the Highway Patrol and the way that we do business. So I want you to understand exactly what it is and what we're asking for, how this bill would affect the law, and also some things that we're not trying to change, we're not trying to mess with in this bill. The problem lies in our wording in KSA 8-234B in the definition of a commercial driver's license in a Class A, B, and C vehicle. Our current statute only has the gross vehicle weight rating, and that gross vehicle weight rating is what a manufacturer determines is the highest loaded weight that that vehicle should be. If you look inside even your own personal car, you'll see a federal certification sticker that has a GVWR. The problem is that our federal regulation, in the Code of Federal Regulation, Title 49, 383.5, defines a commercial motor vehicle for CDL purposes as both the gross vehicle weight rating and also the gross vehicle weight. That means the physical weight, whether we pull it up at one of our weigh stations or get out our portable scales, take it to a co-op, something of that nature, and actually physically weigh it. To our knowledge, we're one of only 3 states where our state statute conflicts and is actually less restrictive than our federal regulation. So this creates problems when we're doing our commercial vehicle enforcement, especially for drivers who are engaged in interstate commerce, crossing state lines into our state. A problem could also arise from our own Kansas residents, who they may seek information from a Kansas police officer, even from the Highway Patrol, and be told that the only thing that defines your vehicle as requiring a CDL is the gross vehicle weight rating. And currently, that's correct information based on 8-234B. But then they could enter another state, and all of our border states, they all adopt the regulation as written in the federal regulation, and then they could be put into a position where they're now required a CDL in another state. They could be ticketed. If they're on a commercial vehicle inspection, they could be declared out of service. Some states, I'm sure they can even be arrested and have their vehicle towed. all when they thought they had the right information from the Kansas Highway Patrol. So we have to be cautious when we advise people on that, hey, this is what our state statute says, but many other states, most other states, also uses that gross vehicle weight. A quick little lesson in CDL applicability, first of all. It's real easy. We spend hours in class doing it. I can do it in less than a minute, I'm sure. A Class A vehicle is a combination over 26,000 pounds, and it's pulling a trailer or a towed unit over 10,000 pounds. So think tractor trailer, but also pickup trucks and large trailers. A Class B is a single vehicle over 26,000 pounds. Think buses, dump trucks, large box trucks, things of that nature. And then a Class C, we have to say people and placards. That's when it's been designed for 16 or more people, including the driver, or when it's any size vehicle that requires placards. Even a motorcycle with a stick of dynamite would require a Class C CDL for that. So our federal regulation does not match our state statute, which creates problems. We currently have 277 certified inspectors in the state of Kansas that can conduct commercial vehicle inspections. And so of those inspectors, a lot of times what we're finding now, there's a lot of fraud in the trucking industry, unfortunately, and there's some bad actors. And so you'll have someone who has a truck that physically, I'm sorry, not physically, but has a gross vehicle weight rating of, say, a 12,000-pound truck with a 14,000-pound trailer. That's exactly 26,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating. No CDL is required for that. But then they'll load that vehicle down to maybe as much as 40,000 pounds. We have many examples of that. And now, within the state of Kansas, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't write them a ticket. We can't give them a warning for it. We can't put it on a commercial vehicle inspection. We can't declare them out of service. All we can do is say, be careful merging back into traffic, and when you get to any other state, you're going to be operating in an out-of-service condition. So they would need to offload some of those vehicles. There's a lot of fraudulent attempts where they're scraping off the gross vehicle weight rating off of these trailers because they know if we don't have the GVWR, there's a good chance we won't be able to weigh that vehicle. We only have a handful of people who carry scales in the state anyway, and so it's difficult to get one of these vehicles weighed. A coworker of mine recently found a truck that had a rating of 25,900 pounds, but physically weighed 33,000 pounds. The whole purpose of the CDL Act in 1991, when it was created, was safety. That's the main goal. These trucks are larger, they're wider, they're taller, they're longer, they're harder to control, they're harder to see out of. They just don't bend around a corner like a little Honda Civic or something might. They require special skills, and that's for good reason because of the type of cargo they're hauling, the size that they are, and the damage they can cause when they're not driven correctly. So we want to make sure that our state statute aligns with our federal regulation. So if we have a vehicle that's over 26,000 pounds, actual weight currently, there's nothing we can do about it. One of the representatives in the House actually mentioned during our previous testimony that even some of these smaller vehicles, like an F-450 and a trailer hauling a water tank, is actually more difficult at times to handle than a tractor trailer, just because of the higher profile vehicle and slosh factor and things like that. The problem also with the derating of trailers is that a motor carrier will request a derated trailer. They may have purchased that trailer at 18,000, 20,000 gross vehicle weight rating, but then they pay the manufacturer as much or as little as $35. They send them a new sticker, they put on their trailer, and now that trailer is magically rated 10,000 pounds. If we stop it, we can't get it into a Class A CDL, even if we physically weigh it, and they weigh 40,000 pounds. So therefore, they're driving a CDL-required vehicle by federal definition, but not by our state law. So I want to talk about what this bill does not affect. This would not affect the non-CDL classes. In 8-234B, you'll see those definitions also for a non-commercial driver's license. For example, a farmer may have a Class A non-commercial driver's license. We're not asking to change anything there. We're going to keep that at GVWR because it affects such a small number of drivers there, and it's only for Kansas drivers for that situation anyway. It also doesn't affect any Kansas farmers who are already exempted out of the CDL requirements. In KSA 8-2,127, we have some exemptions in there for farmers hauling certain materials intrastate, wholly within Kansas, and also 150 miles from any of their farms. They would not be required that CDL. There's also some federal exemptions under what's called a covered farm vehicle that came about under MAP 21 in about 2015 or so. This is also not just some way to line up and write people tickets. We're not going to be staking people out, trying to get them into these regulations. It's going to be one of those things where we're going to use it when it's appropriate and so that we can properly enforce those regulations. One of the other problems is that as drivers, a driver may have been put out of service, meaning they can't operate without a CDL in Missouri, and then we stop them in Kansas, they still don't have a CDL. Now there's nothing we can do because they have the right driver's license based on our statute. This will ultimately increase uniformity, increase consistency, and we hope increase safety as well. Another part of the bill there is the definition of a gross vehicle weight. As we put this bill together, we wanted it to be very clear what we mean by that, so that 20, 30 years from now, when somebody else is sitting in all of our seats, they know exactly what the drafters of this bill meant. And then the definition of an air mile, since it wasn't in there before, and that language is used. We feel it's important to define any terms that we use. I think that pretty well covers it. We just want you to understand what we want to do is just to add in the gross vehicle weight beyond the gross vehicle weight rating. And ultimately, we're not going to mess with any of our farmers who are already exempted from CDLs anyway. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that I can.
Would this affect a farm vehicle that required a placard?
That's a great question. So there's another portion of our regulations that deals with, there are some other exceptions for placards, so it's going to depend which placards there are. There are certain ones that if they're a farmer, they get kicked out of all of the hazmat regulations, and other ones, specifically Class 2 materials, so think of like anhydrous ammonia, propane, things like that, they are still subject to those. So that's not going to change anything that's already in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quickly, I have a hypothetical example. Moving industry, it's $900 million in the state of Kansas, and you have a trailer that has a gross vehicle weight of 10,000 or more, and they look to have it replacarded down due to the fact they'll never have 10,000 pounds on that trailer. Would they lose the ability to do that with this change?
Are you asking would they lose the ability to derate that trailer?
Yes.
No, that's all based on the manufacturers, and most of them will do that. A lot of the smaller trailers use like big techs and those type PJ trailers. Gooseneck, think like a flatbed gooseneck behind a pickup. So that's up to the manufacturers if they'll do it, and most of them will do that. Some will actually change things like remove leaf springs, but other ones, they'll just send you a new sticker. So that wouldn't change anything on that.
Would it require them to be a Class A versus another class?
The only way that would be affected is if they did physically load that. So let's say you had that trailer rated at 10,000. There's no way we could get it into Class A currently. If this bill goes through, the only way they would get into Class A is if they physically had that over 26,000 and that trailer was over 10,000 actual. So let's say he had it behind let's go easier math. Let's say he's got an 18,000 pound truck and he puts that 10,000 rated trailer. Right now, that's not a Class A because that trailer's not over 10. Now, if he physically loaded that trailer down to say 11,000 pounds, now he would have a Class A based on this changes if this goes through.
Yeah, it's helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the very thorough explanation of this bill. So people are paying attention.
Thank you.
And I got an email, and I just want to ask you there are three criteria that may be affected by this. Landscaping businesses who haul heavy trailers.
Yes, they could be. Since they're going to be in commerce, if they are where this could push them into being a commercial vehicle as far as CDL purposes, meaning over 26, trailer over 10, yes, they would need a CDL.
Remodeling businesses.
Yes, same answer.
You mentioned farming has an exemption, but what about light farming or ranching or pulling just a few cows on my trailer?
If they are a Kansas farmer, they're going to get those exemptions in trust state and then 150 from their farm. Hauling, I made sure, it's almost like I knew this might get asked. Farm, it's got to have a farm tag on it. Agricultural products, machinery, supplies, or both to or from a farm. They have to be a private carrier and have a Kansas farm tag on there. So that would be considered an agricultural material or product, having cattle. And so therefore, they would get the exemption already for CDL. So this would not change that.
Just one last, if I might. So they have to take the CDL training and have to pass that training as well, right, to get the CDL license?
To get the CDL, yes. They have to take what's called entry-level driver training, and there's three parts to that. Basically some classroom, and then you have to go take it at KDOR or a third-party tester to get the CDL, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. So I, too, have been getting some emails with questions about this. First of all, where are those exemptions that you're talking about for farmers and the 150 miles? Where is that?
Those are found in 8-2, 127. 8-2, 127. And then they're also found federally under what's called a covered farm vehicle. And that definition, it comes out of what's called MAP 21, Moving Ahead for Progress, came about, I think it was 2015 or a couple of years prior. And specifically, it'll be in 49 CFR 390.38 or 39. It's one of the two. And then that kind of breaks down. It's a little tricky to read, but that's where we find those definitions.
Great, thank you for that. And then a hypothetical that I've been receiving, so you're not a farmer, you're not exempt under the two statutes and the regulations that you just said, and you've got your F-450 pickup truck, you've got a trailer, you've lost your job as an electrician or something, and you say, okay, I've got to make ends meet, and so I'm going to, transport some bales of hay for my neighbors or cattle or livestock or whatnot. And now, if this bill were to become law, now you need a CDL, otherwise you can't haul those things. Do I have that right?
For the most part, yes. If there's commerce involved, so is commerce meaning some barter, trade, exchange of money, intent to make money, that's going to be the first part of needing a CDL. Now, they may need a non-commercial Class A driver's license if they're a Kansas resident and their GVWR is over 26, trailer over 10. If this bill were to pass, let's say that vehicle was rated right at that 26,000 pounds, and they loaded it beyond that, and they are in commerce, that's where that would push that person into needing a Class A CDL.
So we're putting more regulations on commerce in our state, and it would impact those who aren't farmers but might want to be using their vehicles to make ends meet or other uses. So it's just some emails that I've been getting, and I would think it would be the person's responsibility to know the laws of the other state that they're going into versus our state. And so, I'm just leery about more regulations on commerce in Kansas.
Really understand that valid concern, and really it just aligns what's already in the federal regulation anyway. And so if they do happen to go into another state, they'd be subject to the exact same thing. Just a lot of times we get people in northern Kansas crossing into Nebraska, of course, and so they're subject to all those once they cross those state lines, assuming they're not a farmer, of course.
Right, for our non-farmers.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Clamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and nice job on your answers. And so I want to build on the last two just a little bit. So you have 270,000 small businesses, 11,000 are probably, I think, are landscaping and small business contractors. Do we know how many of those would be impacted by this change? And where I was going with it is the additional cost to go to a Class A ends up being $3 to $5 grand. Going through that process with my own companies, I kind of see that. So just your opinion on, are you seeing most of the accidents or issues driving this legislation, other than just tying in with the federal government, as being, we're seeing a lot of issues at that level with those types of folks, or where are the issues occurring today?
That's
a lot
not
to unpack there.
Great question. That's not necessarily the ones that we're seeing a lot on our roadside inspections. I'm sure there are some of those, just think your local, like you said, landscape companies, your Kansas companies. Where we're seeing a lot of this is really the fraud portion of it, where you have interstate carriers, in other words, trucks coming across the nation, and a lot of them are trying to circumvent the regulations. A lot of them, and not to pick on a specific industry, but a lot of it is what's called the hotshot car hauling business. And that means a pickup truck with like a gooseneck trailer, and they load these trailers down. They're maybe rated at 10,000 pounds, but they're loading them down with 3 maybe big Amazon electric vehicle vans. Those are extremely heavy, and they're as much as 39, 40,000 pounds total combination. Now they've put them way into where a Class A CDL is required, and there's nothing we can do about it currently. So these are drivers that don't have the same training to operate those vehicles, high-profile vehicles and things like that, and they're unsafe. So nationwide, that's where I'm seeing a lot of this is, and within our state, to answer your question.
To add on to that, do you feel like there's an opportunity for an out-of-state bill that doesn't affect the current in-state folks that we've been talking about?
An out-of-state bill?
Or an out-of-state, where we focus on out-of-staters versus kind of some of these things that you're not seeing a lot of issues with internally?
So to understand your question, you're asking if this were to only affect drivers coming into Kansas who are not already Kansas licensed, almost like an exemption for a Kansas driver? It would be a little more difficult to enforce, I'll say that, because then now you're adding an exemption into things and that muddies the waters. So I suppose it's possible that it could be. There's other places where we exempt, just like the farmers, we exempt them intra-state within Kansas, but that could be a little bit trickier to enforce.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Further questions? Seeing none. Senator Dietrich.
So just one last question here. So how long has this inconsistency between federal law and state law been noted?
I think I discovered it probably about 2017, just kind of sitting around reading statutes, doing weird things like that.
That is odd.
It is odd. Ask my coworkers, it's odd. But I think as long as this CDL has been in place since 1991, I don't know the history of it, if it's ever initially was gross vehicle weight rating or weight rather and changed back. I don't think it has. I think we've been inconsistent the entire time.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate each of your time.
Next up, Zach Denny. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Zach Denny, Kansas Department of Revenue. I don't know that I have much else to add. You covered it pretty well. We worked closely with KHP on this and the other stakeholders to ensure there'd be no disruptions to the major industries that this affects. And I included an example in my testimony that the previous conferee mentioned about the hotshot trailers. I think that's where a lot of it is seen. And again, this is just to mirror federal regulations and ensure that people are properly licensed to tow the loads that they are attempting to tow. With that, I'd just be happy to stand for any additional questions.
Any questions for Zach? Zach, have you reached out to any of the remodelers or the landscape people?
We did not. We didn't hear from anyone either, though. I mean, we tried to do a lot of outreach on this, and we didn't hear any negative feedback.
I know the last time we messed with landscapers and remodelers, it was quite an email storm to the Capitol.
Is it okay if Charles Bradley, you can?
Just come and state your name.
Charles Bradley, Kansas Department of Revenue. 26,000 pounds is a lot of weight. In my testimony, I put the example, I believe that is an F-450 hauling 6 Priuses. It's a lot of cars. If you're hauling 6 cows, you're not going to get anywhere close to that. You would have to be hauling 24 cattle. Right. If you're hauling hay bales, I believe round bales go around maybe 1,000, 1,500 if you're really good. That's going to be at least 20 bales. If you put 20 bales on the back of a pickup truck, you are dangerous. This isn't going to affect, technically it could affect remodelers. Technically it could affect landscaping businesses. Those people aren't and should not be hauling 26,000 pounds behind them. Most of these landscapers don't have crane excavators. That's the kind of thing that weighs up to 26,000 pounds. If you're hauling a couple lawnmowers behind you, that's not going to impact you. I just wanted to clarify that it seems like there was some confusion on that. 26,000 pounds is a lot of weight. And if you're putting that on the back of a pickup truck, you are going to hurt people. The main thing that we're trying to address, and Nick can testify, we have seen pickup trucks hauling 6, 7 trucks on the back of their flatbed, and that's the danger. And I believe that was the fatality in Southwest Kansas, was it not? Okay. Anyways, any questions regarding that?
Senator Clem.
Sorry to belabor the point. 26,000 pounds in your references, the ones that are super dangerous are already exempt, if I'm not mistaken, on the hay bales. So this, and then secondly, you have a 6,000 to 7,000 pound vehicle on the front side. Your weight on the trailer is very different, so you're adding those two together, right? I think is to get to your 26,000 pounds.
That would be correct.
So,
I mentioned that
yeah.
a combination vehicle, the weight is also a little bit different.
I agree with you. So when you're running landscaping with bags of mulch or soil for topsoil, you can get there pretty quick on getting above the weight of 10,000 pounds on a trailer. So it would affect a lot of those groups that we're talking about, or some lumber for a redo of a room in a garage or a kitchen. So I understand the issue of safety, and I fully understand that, and we need to address that. But I think when we're talking about, you mentioned earlier, we exempted the large businesses, or they didn't have an issue in the conversation. Well, the small businesses are the ones we're trying to think about in this conversation. So there is a real conversation there, and I appreciate it coming up from the other senators too. Thank you.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just to dovetail on that conversation as well, thank you. If it's so dangerous and we see these on our roadways, why aren't we pulling people over for being reckless?
I believe reckless requires a different mental capacity, a mens rea, when they're actually driving.
Such as what? You know you're hauling a big load. You know you're hauling 6 Priuses or something. So I just find it curious. I think we already have some measures we could take if we see an overloaded, large vehicle that we could be citing them for recklessness if it's an observation that's been so dangerous.
Correct. If they're weaving all over the road, then possibly the trooper could interact. The trooper isn't going to be able to pull them over simply because they're overweight, and he knows they're not going to be able to stop, or that they're not skilled properly to operate 26,000 pounds.
But the fact is the weight, and so the weight is the danger. So anyway, I would think we could already be pulling them over for being reckless in loading up such a heavy vehicle. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could just speak to that real quick. I think someone can correct me if I'm wrong, probably the troopers. I think the situation here is that they can be pulled over currently for that situation. They just can't be cited, and their driving record can't be altered, if that makes sense. I think that's sort of where it's coming from. And KHP can correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like they're, but I believe that's where this is coming from.
Nick Wright again from the Highway Patrol. So the reckless statute would require a wanton disregard for the safety of others or property, I believe is the wording of the statute. So it would be hard to probably get that through a prosecutor, to be quite honest with you. In my experience, they're not real hip on charging reckless without a lot of other factors, but just being overweight, I don't think we'd be able to make that fly. We could stop them if we believe that they're overweight, and again, that's only for somebody who has some training in size and weight and has the ability to weigh them. There are rules in place as far as how far we can take them and if we have portable scales, that sort of thing. So this is for those vehicles that would be dangerously overweight. So for example, the landscapers, as we mentioned, if they are way overweight, maybe a whole bunch of topsoil or something, be quite a few bags of that, and you might see some sort of evidence of that. Maybe the tires are squatted or things like that. And now we would have a driver who doesn't have the right driver's license to control that vehicle properly, doesn't have the right training. So I don't know if that helps answer that question on the reckless a little bit, or I'm sorry, I forget who asked it now. I apologize. I think I was looking at you. I apologize, ma'am. So if hopefully that answers that, or I can follow up if I can.
Sure, thank you, appreciate that. But again, so this is all so that we can have a proper traffic stop, right? And you're not going to be able, I wouldn't think, to be able to look at a vehicle and then determine they're over the gross vehicle weight just by looking at it, even though they're driving within their lane. So again, I find it, if you're driving with you in your lane, yet it's been so dangerous just because you see that they're overweight, why aren't we pulling those folks over now? So we're going to then regulate them and have them go through the expense and all that, so that we have an opportunity to cite them, when it seems to me we could already be doing that. Because your first observation is, well, that's a vehicle that looks like it might be big and heavy, and that's a danger to our road, so I want to make sure they're within this new regulation that we've created, versus the real danger is they're on the roads, and why aren't we pulling them over simply because it's a big, heavy vehicle? But I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but I would think if it's been such a danger, we would already be taking some measures. But, and again, the regulations on our small business are a concern also. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would it be okay if I responded to a portion of that? Is that okay? This is not so we can find a reason to stop vehicles. We're not going to know if that driver has the right CDL until we get them stopped. This is going to come up when they've either been involved in a crash and any law enforcement officer is there investigating that crash, or one of our 277 members, mostly the Highway Patrol, are conducting a commercial vehicle inspection, and part of that is to verify the right driver's license and hold them to that same standard as we do federally for other things. When they're crossing state lines, they're held to certain federal regulations. So it's not, I just want to clarify, we're not trying to find another way to stop vehicles or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Committee note we have written testimony from Mike Hamey from the KCC. Are there any opponents? Any neutrals? We'll close the hearing on 2604. Turn our attention to 2522. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2522 would permit certain flashing lights currently prohibited or not provided for in statute to be allowed on vehicles and trailers under certain circumstances. Section 1 of the bill would provides that, flashing lights are generally prohibited, but under this bill would provide an exception, which is found in Section 2, whereby vehicles engaged in highway construction and maintenance would be allowed to display flashing, rotating, or oscillating amber, green, or white lights at all times in a road construction zone. And then subsection B of the Section 2 would add new language to permit stationary trailers engaged in highway construction and maintenance operations to display flashing, rotating, or oscillating white and blue lights within the area of the road construction zone when any portion of the roadway is closed and when the lights are used during the hours between sunset and sunrise and when there are workers present in the road construction zone. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee questions? Seeing none, thank you. First up, Michael White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Michael White, Executive Director of the Kansas Contractors Association, and we stand in strong support of House Bill 2522. We had it introduced. I'm going to be brief. I've got a couple of members with me today that are experts in construction zones, and I want them to have the opportunity to speak. I know you're limited on time with the next committee coming in. To us, this bill is very simple, and it really updates lighting and the technology we're seeing out there that's available and our contractors are using. So this bill would allow, current law, we can use amber and white in construction zones. This would allow to add into that rotation of lighting the color green. So we would be able to use a rotation of amber, white, and green at all times in construction zones. And then in working with KDOT and other partners, this bill was really came together after several meetings with stakeholders. We're seeing at night, obviously, even more distractions in construction zones. And so at night, I've got contractors, particularly in the metro, Kansas City, Wichita areas, where most of our night zone work is done, night construction. We actually talked to law enforcement about using red and blue in very specific situations. And in negotiating with law enforcement, we came to the conclusion to use blue and white. I would note that we worked with law enforcement. The original bill had it stationary on a vehicle. We changed that to trailers. Law enforcement asked that we use trailers and not vehicles. So the technology that the members that are going to follow me will talk to you about can all be on a trailer. And so at night, only at night, at the start of a construction zone, we would be allowed to use blue and white on a trailer in a stationary position behind the cones in the construction zone. So that's the only difference from what would be allowed in the amber, white, and green at all times. Mr. Chairman, I have not had an opportunity to talk to you, but since this bill has passed the House, we are going to ask for one very small amendment. We thought we got it right in the House. The House amended it to include roadway. We are going to ask that this committee strike the word roadway. It's on page 2. I want to say it's line 16. Rather than roadway, we want that to say highway. So roadway, by definition, only includes the actual roadways. It does not include shoulders and ditches. Highway includes from right-of-way to right-of-way. So we want to make sure, and everybody's on board with that change. Law enforcement actually brought that change to us. So with that, Mr. Speaker, the only thing I would note in my testimony, in the testimony on page 2, my board, have worked with stakeholders on not only this bill, but I would just remind this committee, as part of our efforts to improve work zone safety, Senate Bill 324, which is in this committee, and we're hopeful that that will get worked as part of our effort. And then page 3 of my testimony, I just want to encourage all of you to take a look at this. We have started in concert with KDOT an education on work zone safety. It's a volunteer education online program that we've developed with other states that is all geared towards teenage drivers. And it's a great course online. It takes about 45 minutes. Students that go on and voluntarily take it are entered into an opportunity to win a scholarship. So I would highly encourage all of you, as you're doing your newsletters, as you are communicating with constituents, so we're trying to spread the word on this volunteer program. It's part of our education effort. We see the need for Senate Bill 324 in terms of enforcement and improving distractions in work zones. This is a lighting component that we want to update lighting for the safety. And I would remind the committee, this is not just safety for workers in the work zone. All of these measures are also safety for the the traveling public as they maneuver through work zones. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. My voice is going. I'm going to turn it over to my vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, any questions from the committee at this time? Senator Warren.
Thank you. I didn't know if we wanted to reserve questions till after all the proponents, but I've got a question. So thank you very much. And I see on page 2 of the bill, section 2, so there's a difference between section 2A and 2B in that section A says the lights can be displayed at all times, and section B is just during dark, so between sunset and sunrise and when workers are present. I personally kind of find sometimes those flashing lights are very distracting, as a matter of fact, because I'm paying attention to the lights and what do they mean and things like that. And oh my gosh, is there an emergency? Is there a crash up ahead? So I'm wondering why not the same restrictions that we see in section B, only at night and only when workers are present, that not in A?
Well, I mean, so the first section, section A, is currently, literally section A is just adding green. Right now, currently, we can use amber and white all the time in construction zones, flashing. If you drive out in a construction zone right now, you'll see that combination. So we're just simply adding green to what we're currently doing. And then we had to have section B in there because we're putting more restrictions on the use of blue and white. And so in section B, that's why the restrictions are sunset to sunrise and when workers are present. So otherwise, we would not be using blue and white ever, except for under those conditions. And it's only at the start of the construction zone. So we can't have blue and white in combination throughout the work zone. It's only at the beginning, and it's literally just because and the contractors will tell you that when they testify, these colors slow people down. And that's what our goal is.
I don't see any language that restricts it only to the beginning of the zone, and in subsection A, it's all new language, the italics. So it looks like you're adding flashing, rotating, or oscillating amber, green, or white lights at all times. and not just at the front and the back end of the zones.
So our intent with this bill, and I understand the italicized language, but I think current law is amber and white in rotating fashion, because that's what we're currently doing. Where we simply, this is updated language, I assume, adding the green. And then section 2, we literally are just adding more restrictions in the use of blue and white.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Vice Chair, I guess.
Thank you, Michael. You think there's an opportunity to add clarity through another amendment possibly on that? If you take a look at that and see.
If we need to clarify something, we're always open to clarifying it.
Thank you.
So.
Next, Kevin Shelton, President of Seahawk Construction.
Mr. Chairman and committee, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to stand before you today in support of this bill. My name is Kevin Shelton. I am the president and owner of Seahawk Construction. We specialize in traffic control and pavement markings across the state. I've been doing this. March is 37 years in this state for me. We've been in Eudora, Kansas, and we work statewide. I've spent my entire career in the roadway safety industry, working directly with traffic control and pavement markings. Over that time, I've seen firsthand how quickly a normal workday can become dangerous when workers are exposed to live traffic. This is firsthand knowledge. I've actually had a drum hit out of my hand by a traveling vehicle that was distracted by a cell phone as they later crashed down the road, and the crash report stated that they were on a cell phone. Knocked the cone, excuse me, out of my hand. So I see how these happen. For those of us in this industry, work zone safety is not an occasional concern or a talking point. It's an everyday reality that affects how we plan, how we set up, and how we protect our crews, and how we make sure that the traveling public, because my job as a traffic control subcontractor is not just providing safety for my work zone, but it's also providing that the traveling public safely traverses through the work zones. And I thank you for this opportunity today to speak about the importance of this technology in highway work zones. Work zones remain one of the most dangerous areas on Kansas roadways, and we cannot accept these crashes and fatalities as normal or unavoidable. Kansas data shows that in 2024, there were 1,705 work zone crashes, including 383 injury crashes, 8 fatalities. These numbers represent real people and real families. What also is important to recognize is that driver-related contributing circumstances were recorded in 92% of Kansas work zone crashes. That tells us a major part of the work zone safety problem is not the construction work itself, but driver behavior, speed, distraction, and delayed reaction time. Technology helps address these challenges in a practical way. It gives drivers earlier warning, better information, and more time to react. It also helps reduce the amount of time roadway workers are exposed to live traffic. This is where technology is making a difference today, and why I'm wanting to speak to you. Technology's come a long way since when I started in 1989. In 1989, the MUTC allowed a amber rotating steady light on the top of a vehicle. Very difficult to see, especially in an urban area when there's lots of other stuff around. The MUTCD, with the improvements and the new versions of the MUTCD we've allowed, there's been wonderful changes to technology that allows now the use of additional types of strobe lights, flashing lights instead of rotating, and now colors can come into it. And now when I go, I just spent a week in Houston last week for our national convention, and when you go look at and try to buy paint trucks and grinder trucks and work zone trucks, these vehicles all come with those light packages already on them. The light manufacturers are installing them with multiple patterns that can be used, that can be changed. Instead of just flashing at the ends, it can flash all around to help draw attention that there's something up ahead that needs your attention as a driver. And that's important to us, because when I put most of the people that work for me are younger, and they have young families. And it's important for me as a business owner to make sure they get home to their families each night. And I'm willing to pay whatever it costs for technology to help that cause to bring them home safely. The MUTCD acknowledges that the intelligent transportation systems in work zones
Kevin?
have been found.
Let me stop you real quick. We have two more proponents after you. We appreciate your testimony. Do you have a wrap-up?
I just want to say thank you. I'm in favor of this. And, you know, work zones are temporary, but the consequences of traffic crashes are not. So
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Committee will come back to questions if there are some after the next two proponents. Colin, Director of Safety, Bettis Company.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I am Colin Salzberg, Safety Director with Bettis Companies. We're comprised of 8 different construction companies based out of Topeka here. We are in favor of HB 2522. We believe that this brings more safety to our roadway workers. What we're wanting to do is be more visible out on the roadway. A lot of times we have cones and vests out there, basically between us and the traveling public. What we're wanting to do is add in more lighting so that the traveling public will know where we're at and be visible and actually pay attention to what we're doing out there on the road instead of being distracted. So thank you. We stand by this HB 2522, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Joel Skelly, Director of Policy, KDOT.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, members of the committee. Joel Skelly at KDOT. I will keep this brief because I know we are running short and you probably have some more questions. Quickly to address Senator Warren's question about the statutes currently in 81729 and 81730 is where it actually lists out where construction vehicles or equipment can use amber and white flashing lights. Those are not restricted to a time of day. It is currently in use. We've had recent years past bills that have been introduced and passed to allow for those use of those amber lights flashing for other service vehicles, such as utility vehicles when they're out on the roadway, like your Evergy or your Kansas Gas Service, trash trucks as well. So those are all devices or service equipment that's using those devices and those flashing lights. KDOT is in support of this bill because this does add an additional color that actually draws attention to those construction vehicles during those construction zones. We have said this in the past for many other safety bills, and I'll say it again. In our construction zones, there are often lane width reductions, reduction in our non-traditional lane maneuvers, detours, and flagger operations that then require our public drivers, their full attention to be focused on that driving at hand. So we want to make sure that this is actually just an added benefit to make sure that they're aware and can clearly identify those construction vehicles apart from another vehicle that may have, like you may have a service vehicle that inadvertently left their yellow amber lights flashing and then continues on down the road, or a pilot vehicle where a construction vehicle may veer off onto the shoulder or into the construction zone. We don't want those people that are potentially following those vehicles to follow along into those areas. So this does, we feel, create a practical step towards improving work zone safety in our construction areas. Safety, again, is our priority for KDOT, and protecting our highway maintenance workers as well as our contract partners. So with that, I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Joel. Any other verbal proponents? Not seeing any. This committee, I would draw your attention to 2 written proponents. Ed Klump on behalf of the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Sheriff's Association, and the Kansas Peace Officer Association, and Anne Marie Yatsula as a staff attorney with the League of Kansas Municipalities. So there are no opponents and there are no neutrals. I would open it up for questions if there's any additional questions. Senator Arkwright.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just curiosity that obviously companies are supportive of this, and I don't know how small the companies get within this realm. Excuse me. Do the light bars, do they already have green lights, or is this a new equipment?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the light bars we've bought in the last 4 or 5 years have already have the green on them.
So if they're older than that, some would have to be equipped,
Yes.
re-equipped. Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Chair Peterson?
Yeah, this is not requiring them to put the green on, is it?
If I restate that question, it's not a requirement to put the green on?
Good question, Mr. Chairman. I don't know that they would have to. So they may display flashing, rotating, and oscillating amber, green, and white lights.
Any additional questions? Not seeing any. We will close hearing on House Bill 2522. Committee, that should wrap us up for the day. We are adjourned.